Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is day 54 over 100 days of DevOps. Now, this is not the original video for day 54, as the original video for day 54 got corrupted, and I did not realize until after I had already done until after I was already done with the recording. So I have to remake the video, and you can confirm from my screen as you're seeing only one virtual machine. So I was already done with the entire recording, and I already deleted the Windows virtual machine because we are not really going to be working with um, a Windows server except if need be. So I already deleted it, and I always say if you have the resource that you're not using, the best thing is to delete that resource so you don't incur cost one way or the other. But nevertheless, I'm still going to try and be as explanatory as possible. So we've been looking at Azure for the past, I think, about 3 to 4 days, and yesterday we created two VMs, two virtual machines, one Windows virtual machine and one Ubuntu virtual machine. And we configured both virtual machines as web servers. Right? We configured them as web servers. But within the virtual machine themselves, you could actually access the web servers. For Windows IIS, we could access it. But on our own PC, on our own laptop, we could not, access those virtual machines, those web servers. We couldn't access IIS on Windows virtual machine, and we couldn't access Nginx on Linux virtual machine, despite we using their public IP address. So, and I said I was going to continue with that in the next video. So, why is that? And that is what brings us to the concept of Azure networking, which is what we are going to look into today. So we're going to cover about 6 things under Azure networking. We cover VNet, Subnet, NSG, ASG, load balancer, and VNet peering. So without wasting much time, I'll start from VNet. Sorry, what exactly is a virtual network? Now, according to definition here, a virtual network provides the found fundamental building blocks for your private network in Azure. This service enables Azure resources like virtual machines to securely communicate with each other over the internet and its on-premise network. So basically, um, a virtual network just helps communication between two resources on Azure, right? So now, how is the virtual network created? The same way for virtual machines are basically created on physical servers, right? We've already established that the virtual machine that you request for on Azure actually gotten from a physical server that is an Azure data center, right? So now in that data center, it's not just the virtual, it's not just the servers that are there. There are other things there, the switch, network switch, the routers, and all of that. So just the same way physical machine is gotten from physical servers, just the same way virtual machine is gotten from physical servers, is exactly the same way virtual network is gotten from physical network. Let's say, for example, now you try to set up a virtual network. We are going to do that. We are going to try and do that sometime in this video. We try to set up you try to create a virtual network and someone else tries to create a virtual network. What Azure does is that from the main physical network, Azure will pick out a space called it's a virtual network. So if you take out a space and allocate to you, or someone else wants to request, it takes out another space, allocate, and Azure will keep allocating virtual network from the physical network and provide it to you. So The virtual network that is given to you, the IPs that are given to you, they are private to you. They are private to you. So Azure will not take another the same virtual network that has given to you. It will not take it and give it to another person. So whatever virtual network has been given to you in AWS, we call it VPC, that's virtual private cloud. So it is private to you. So Azure cannot give the same virtual network to more than one person. So that's just the concept of VNet. It's not really one big word. It's the same network, but instead of the physical network now, it is virtual. Remember that everything that we're using on Azure is actually, from our own end, it is virtual, but from Azure's end, we are working with a physical data center. So it is the same thing with VNet. For subnets, I've explained what subnets are in my networking video. If you're yet to watch my networking video, I would advise that you go and watch the networking videos as I might not be doing a lot of in-depth explanation here because the concepts are actually the same. You understand? So the concepts are the same regardless of description that you put it, right? So basically, what are subnets? Subnets are just parts of a network. Like you separate a part of a network and then you allocate it to whatever it is needed for, whatever it has been, requested for. And we also talked about CIDR because CIDR is what enables us to separate a VNet into subnets. So CIDR range, you have to if you're even ./24, if you're even /25 or /30 or /16, not the total number of IPs that are available. That is what you're going to allocate into a subnet. So now let's look at NSG. NSG basically means network security group, right? So what does NSG do? Now remember, let's now come back to the reason why we couldn't access our Nginx server yesterday from our local PC. Now, the way Azure VNet is designed, right? By default, by default, inbound and outbound traffic to a virtual machine on a VNet is blocked by Azure. That was why we couldn't access it yesterday because by default, inbound and outbound traffic is usually blocked, to a virtual machine on a VNet, right? So I'm going to show you now. Network security group is sounds like a firewall. I can pull up the definition here. You can see it sounds like a firewall to filter traffic between Azure resources and in a virtual network, right? So it contains security rules that allows you to determine the inbound, the outbound traffic. You can determine okay which traffic is allowed, which port is allowed, from which device, from which IP address to which IP address, and stuff like that. So if I come here, so now I'm on the virtual machine um game. Let me start it. And then let me try and connect again. Just to further prove that just to confirm that we are still unable to connect to our VM from our local PC. So I'm just going to give it a few seconds for the virtual machine to come on. So I should have started this um before now. So let me copy the public IP address and I'll put it here. Our Nginx works on port 80. So when I enter port 80, I'm unable to access the Nginx, right? I'm unable to access it. So how do I confirm that port 80 is I'm not able to reach this VM on port 80? When I come to under networking, you'll see network settings. When you click on network settings, so if you click on network settings, this is where you see this is your NSG, this is your network security group, and this is where you see allowed inbound and outbound traffic. So you can see that if you look at the last one here, you can see deny all inbound. So all inbound traffic are denied by default. Same way with all outbound traffic are denied by default. So that is the way it is. By default, all inbound and outbound traffic on a virtual machine in a virtual network are denied by default. So you would not be able to have access to that virtual machine if you're trying to reach it from external source. You can only um, make use of that virtual machine within the virtual machine. Within the virtual machine, you can make use of it. But if you're trying to reach it outside from outside the virtual machine, you will not be able to do that. The only port that's allowed here is port 22. And that was why we were able to SSH into the virtual machine yesterday when we were after creating it, we were able to SSH into it with downloaded the public key and all of that. So now, what do we do now? So all inbound traffic is denied by default. Azure load balancer is allowed from the load balancer service and to any part of the virtual machine. And then VNet is allowed. As long as two devices are within the same virtual network, they are able to communicate by default. So long two devices are on the same virtual network, they'll be able to communicate. So if I have another um, um, VM. Let's say, for example, now if my Windows VM was still actually active, if I go into the VM, I'll be able to reach my Linux VM from my Windows VM. Why? Because they are within the same virtual network. So by default, except a device is you know within the same network, they will not be able to communicate. But once they're within the same network, they will be able to communicate. So let's look at some parts of NSG, we have the priority. Priority is very, very important. It's almost one of the most important things when it comes to um, setting up another security group because the way it works, the lower the number, the higher the priority. I'll take that again. The lower the number, the higher the priority. So now we can see this is 300. 300 is greater than 65,000. So 300 has a greater priority than 65,000. If I want to override this now, and I say, okay, um, I want 200, it's not going to work, right? So the higher priority, the higher if I do another SSH if I do another SSH rule and instead of allow, I deny it. I'm going to try that. I'm even going to try that as right now. Instead of allowing it, I deny it. I will not delete this. I'll just create another rule on top and give it a higher priority. So which is deny. You will notice that I will not be able to have access to um this my Ubuntu VM. Now, this is the port. Basically just tells you the ports that you want to allow. The protocol is either TCP or any other protocol. The source can be from anywhere. It can be from your IP address. It can be from a virtual network. It can be from Azure Load Balancer. When we try to create a rule, we'll see all the sources. Then destination. If you want it to get to anywhere on the virtual machine, or you want it to get to a specific port, maybe you have an application that works on maybe ports maybe 5,000, and that you want the source to get to just that port on the virtual machine. You can specify it, or do you want it to get to anywhere on the virtual machine that you're giving it full access to the virtual machine, right? And then the action is either allow or deny. So that's it. Um, Basically, network security could be just like I said, it's like a security or like a firewall that stands in front of your virtual machine that controls inbound and outbound traffic. Now, to test the priority of um, to test this priority, I will log into this VM. I'll SSH into the VM. Now, we have SSH on port 22. So I'll SSH into this VM just to show that we have access to the VM. And after that, we'll come back, we'll create another SSH role, but this time around, we'll give it a higher priority. I will not delete this one. I will have the two. So we'll have to SSH role just to demonstrate to you that the higher priority takes precedence over the lower one. So let me get the public IP address of this just to demonstrate them. Um, and we'll now go and give access to port 80. You can see that port 80 is not allowed. That is the exact reason why we did not have access to NGNet, because NGNet runs on port 80 and it is not allowed. When you're dealing with cloud, you have to explicitly, you know, go and allow certain ports. Whatever ports you want to use, you need to go and allow it, because cloud takes security, very serious. So a lot of things will be denied by default. It will not be allowed, by default. So until you go and allow it by yourself. Yeah. So let me try and log in. Well, let me log in again. Let's see if I can use. Let me see if I can use that same private key. Okay, so now I'm able to access virtual machine. Sorry. Now I'm able to access the virtual machine from my PC using SSH, right? And it's working fine. Now let's go and create a role that would deny SSH actually. So I will from here you can add either inbound or outbound role. So we're going to add inbound role, and so you can see from source, from any source, from my IP address, from service stack. Service stack basically means that if you have any service that is running on Azure, and then you can just use that service as um, a service stack. What I mean is that, let's say for example, now you have a load balancer. So you can just the service pack can be load balancer, it can be any other thing that you that is created on Azure. Then application security group. I'm going to explain that immediately after I'm done with explaining what NSG means. Then source ports, if you want to specify any ports, but you can leave it as star, which means any ports. Now destination, you can say okay, maybe any destination on the virtual machine, or you have is a specific IP address, service type, and all of that. Then the service, which service do you want to allow? You can choose from all of these service. The difference now is that this is custom. If you're using a custom service, you can define the ports. I can come here and say port 8, right? So I can define going to a custom service, and we are trying to allow port 22, rather, port 22, right? Or you can just go and click on SSH. So once I click on SSH, it will show the port. If I do RDP, you can see 3389. It is already there by default and it is grayed out. So you can't change this. But if you choose custom, you can be able to define a custom port by yourself. So I'm going to do SSH, and it was chosen for 22 by itself. Now instead of allow, I'm going to deny. I'm going to deny, and this is 300. So I'm going to make it 200. Sorry, I'm going to make it 200. SSH test. SSH deny. So this is SSH deny test. SSH. Right. So and then I'll apply the rule. So now you can see we have two SSH. One is 300, one is 200. The same port 22 TCP from any source to any destination, and now we have a denial. Now we have two SSH rules. One is a denial rule, one is an allow rule. So let me now go back and try to SSH into this VM. Let me do a new session. This same, I'll use the same IP address. Now the same IP address, and then I'll use the same private key. So when I click on OK, you'll see that I do not have access to this VM. So ignore this one. I'm still able to do one or two things because I'm already logged in by like others. Now I'm already logged in. So this is just ignore this one. So you can see now that I do not have access. So I do not have access to, even if I try to reload it, I do not have access to this virtual machine. Why? Because I already have a deny rule that comes before an allow. So it comes before an allow rule. So like I said, the lower the number, the higher the priority. So if you have a priority of 200 and you have the same port with the priority of 100, the one of 100 would be executed before the one of 200. Now, I'll leave this like this and I'll just come and delete this row. When I delete this row, it will load. Let me wait for it to refresh. Then we'll go back to our mobile XTEM and then we'll refresh it and we'll notice that we're going to have access to the virtual machine. So now we have the SSH, the other one deleted, and we have allow. So let me go back, and when I do load, you'll see that now I have access to log in to the virtual machine. So that is the way it works. That is the way, I just wanted to show us that. So what then are we now going to do? We are unable to access port 80, so we are just going to create an inbound rule for port 80, right? And previously we used any source, so I'm going to use my IP address as a source. That means only my IP address will be able to have access to, this um this virtual machine, right? I can also come and change SSH and change it to only my IP address to be able to have access. So I'll use my IP address. So it will read your current IP address and then it will use it. So this is my IP address. So if you use your own IP address, it will read it. So you don't have to type it. It will automatically read it. And then the source port is any port. The extension is any. Now custom, I could do custom and port 80, or I could just do HTTP. HTTP also gives me port 80, right? So I'll use port 80 and then the priority will be 200, 200, and I'll just name it Nginx so that I'll be able to access Nginx. So when I add the action is allow. So I'll add the rule. Okay, so we've created a rule. The rule is called Nginx. The port is 80 from my IP address. That's from my PC to any destination on the VM. So I will be able to have access to this. So let's now pick the public IP address again. And if I do port 80, I should see welcome to Nginx. So you can see now that we've already allowed port 80 and it's working fine. So that is the way it works with cloud. Most times you need to go and you know go and allow a certain port. If you want to use a certain port, you need to go and allow it because by default for security reasons, all of these things are blocked or are denied by default. So that is that about network security groups. You can create any inbound rule, any outbound rule, play around with it, you know, Just play around with it, mess around with it, and get familiar with working with other security group because you might need to, work with it a whole lot of times, especially when if you are dealing with, application, deploying applications and the like. So that is that about network security groups. Now what we have is ASG. ASG just simply means application security group. So application security group and network security groups are similar, but ASG takes it a step further. ASG takes it a step further in the sense that, okay, let's say for example now, this is your application, and then you have you have let's take this one side, and so you have the front end and you have a back end, right? You have a front end, you have like different front end virtual machine. Let's say you have one, two, three, four front end virtual machines that are serving the application, and then you also have the four back end virtual machines, right? So what application security group does for you is that you might need um you might need just some part of the front end to access some part of the back end. What it will do is that it will group the front end VMs, or it will have like a bunch of group of VMs that serve the same purpose. And then once you groups them, you can set a policy on that group instead of setting a policy on or instead of setting a policy of security on one VM per time, you can put all of those VMs inside a group and then you set a policy on that group. We can say, okay, um, just this two last VM. These two last VM are in the same application security group, and then we'll set the policy on the two last VM to access maybe just these two last backend and virtual machines. So basically, that is what ASG is all about. We're not going to be creating ASG right now, but on the documentation, that's on Microsoft documentation, you can see ASG in Azure Network enables you to configure network security as a natural extension of application structure, allowing you to group virtual machines and define network security policies based on those groups. That's exactly what I have said. You group a number of virtual machines and then you assign policies based on those groups. That if you have like a bunch of virtual machines that work together, let's say for example you have some VMs that should talk to database. There's some front-end VM that should talk to the database, sorry, some back-end VMs that should talk to the database, and then you have just some back-end VMs that maybe just talks only front-end. So there's a way you just group all of them depending on the specification, depending on what you want. You group them, and then those groups you apply security policies on it. So most times you're going to be combining NSG and ASG together. Most times you combine NSG and ASG when you're trying to set up security. So you can always come to the Microsoft Azure portal, and then if you see ASG, so you can also create um, so this is application security groups. So there's no one you can create. It's not a you don't have to define so many things. It's just basically like creating a VNet or a what do you call it? A resource group, right? So you can see that um, it's almost similar to when creating a resource group. You're not putting any details. It's just like it's a group. Basically, it is a group. Just put it in a resource group. Give the name of the ASG, and then you can put your virtual machines in that application security group. So that is the way it works. You're not doing any special configuration. It's just basically a group. So when you group all of them together, then you now use NSG to apply security on that this particular ASG. So that's the way it works. I'm not going to create that now. We're going to I'm supposed to create a virtual network. Um, so let's go ahead and look at how to create virtual networks. So we have two virtual networks here, West Europe and West Europe 1. I'm going to create, click on create. So when creating a virtual network, you give it a virtual network name, test, test VNet, and you click on next. You can encrypt the network. Then Azure Bastion. Remember yesterday when we were trying to connect to our Windows VM, we're given two options. We connect the normal way or we connect via Bastion. So what is Bastion? Bastion is just like um a middle server, right? So the way it works is that instead of having access to the main server directly, there's a server that sits in between yourself and the main server. So only that server has access to the main server. So whenever you want to access the main server, you access the bastion. The bastion will provide you everything that the main server is supposed to provide you, right? But the only difference is that you are not reaching the main server directly. What you are reaching is the bastion. It's also called a jump host. It's a server on its own, right? It's a server on its own. So you configure it to mimic the main server that you want to reach. So customers will not reach, the customers, developers or QAs or DevOps engineer, they will not access the main server itself. What they will do is that they will access a middle server, which is called the Bastion, or it is called Jump Server, or it is called Jump Host. So if you've heard of this term, Jump Host, Jump Server, they are all the same. Jump Host, Jump Server, Bastion, they are all the same. They all perform the same function. Then you can also configure firewall and all of that. So I'll click on next. So now your you can create your virtual network. If you now /16 will give you one thing I even like about this is that it's already giving your CIDR range, that's CIDR. So we have /16 and it's showing you the possible number of IP addresses that will be given to you. Let's say for example now somebody says, okay, please create a virtual network um with 32 IP addresses. So all you need to do is just you come down and then you say, okay, /27 will give me 32 IP addresses. So instead of having to calculate, obviously in our networking video, I've already showed you how you can actually calculate your CIDR range. How we did so many um practice on how to calculate your CIDR range to get the total number of IP addresses that you can get. So, but then Azure makes it easier for us where you don't even need to calculate by yourself. You just choose. It gives you the option. If you want 32 IP addresses, you would specify. If you want 64 and all of that, you specify it. And then this is it. You have a default subnet. You can add subnets, right? If I do slash, I was dash 16. So you can click on add subnet. So once you click on add subnet, then you can break this subnet into you can break it into another subnet, and then you can say you can give the subnet to maybe Azure Bastion, Azure Firewall, VNet Gateway, and all of that. Then you name it default subnet, or you say test subnet, and then you can give it another range. So you can see that this one started from 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.0.25. But the next one you would use the starting IP address is 10.0.1.0, right? So once you configure a lot of other things and you click on add. So now we have our test subnet. You can add as many subnet as you want to add depending on your specification. So if someone says I need this and this and this, I need an IP address range of so, and then I need maybe like two subnet or I need like three subnet, then you can be able to add it there. You can just review and the review is run the check, and once the check is complete, you'll be able to create your virtual network, right? So let's go ahead and create. So we're going to create the virtual network. So basically, that is how you create a VNet. It's very, very simple. You just give the VNet a name, and then you define the IP address range. So it doesn't always have to be 10 dots. So you can decide to make it 192.168 if that's what you are used to, right? So if you decide to do 192.168, it would take it because the virtual network is actually private to you. You can specify the IP address you want to use. If it is 172 you want to use, if it is 192 you want to use, you can go ahead and actually use it. So this is virtual network, and there's nothing much to see here. Just a lot of settings that you can configure and stuff like that. So I'm going to delete this. So we've talked about VNet, Subnet, NSG, ASG, and then we'll talk about load balancer and VNet period. So I think I've explained what a load balancer is, but for reference sake, for purpose of this video, I will explain again. Basically, what a load balancer does is that if you have three virtual machines, let's say for example, you have a Jenkins server, right? That is receiving requests. If it's receiving 100 requests per second, that Jenkins server can still work fine, right? It can still handle the request. Now, let's say it gets to a point where the server, the request on that server becomes more, and then maybe you're getting like 1,000 requests per second. It might still be able to handle it, but when it gets to a situation where the request is more than what the server can actually handle, right? You, the server might crash, right? So in that case, what do? You just say, okay, you want maybe two more instance, maybe you want two more instance of that server. You put another one, and then you put another one here. But then, how do you now um route traffic between that server? So that is where a load balancer comes into play. So a load balancer just stands there to distribute traffic between servers, right? So if request comes, it can distribute the traffic to this one, and then when another request comes, it sends it to this one, and another request comes, it sends it to this one. So request coming through into the load balancer is being forwarded to all of this server one, and then server two, and you know server 3. So that is the video balancer works. I've already explained all of this in depth in my networking video. For Azure networking, I'm just trying to make reference to all of this. The only new thing that we had to look at today was the NSG and then the ASG because these are terms that are peculiar to Azure. The other ones, VNet, Subnet, they are like normal things. Same thing with load balancing. So the last thing I'll talk about today is VNet peering. What exactly is VNet peering, right? By default, if by default we have four virtual machines, right? Since I already said inbound and outbound traffic are not allowed by default, that means virtual machines on different VNets cannot communicate with each other. I said it before that virtual machines on the same VNet or in the same subnet can communicate, but virtual machines on different virtual networks cannot communicate with one another. Right now, for you to enable communication between two devices on a virtual network, you have to enable what we call virtual network peering. So you pair virtual network one with virtual network two, and then you make them as one. So whatever device that is on virtual network one can effectively communicate with what is the device in virtual network two, right? So that is the whole concept of VNet peering. You're basically just trying to pair two virtual networks together to enable communication between the two of them because by default, Azure does not allow does not allow communication between devices on separate VNet. And how can you do that? If you come to if you come to virtual networks, so we have no, I can't demonstrate virtual network pairing in here. Maybe when time goes on, if they need be, we will demonstrate what we will be able to demonstrate virtual network. But these two networks are in West Europe, so I can't do a VNet pairing on them because they are within the same um, location. So when you come down under settings, you will see pairings, right? So when you click on pairings, this is where you configure. There's no pairing. You click on add, and it will give you all the requirements for you to. Okay, so you have to put your link name, which pattern network do you want to do you want to pair with each other. So you will do all of that. You will do it on the on the first pattern network, and then once you are done with the first pattern network, you go to the second pattern network and also do it. So you are doing it on both pattern networks that you want to pair together. So that is the way VNet pairing is actually done. Maybe in subsequent times um I might be able to do a VNet pairing video, right? So with that, I think I believe we've been able to learn a thing or two VNets, subnets, and the likes. I believe we've been able to understand. Now we now have access to our nginx. So if you have any ports that you want to actually allow, but I want to work with, you need to go to the NSG and enable that port, right? And all the concepts are basically just the same thing. So if there's anything that you're not clear with, or if there's anything you still need further explanation on, you can always feel free to drop a comment, and I'll be glad to answer it or even make a separate video on that if as the case may be. So um if you've enjoyed this video up till now, please do well to like the video, share it to those that will be interested in learning about VNet, Subnet, and similar things Azure as a whole, then please do well to subscribe to my channel if you are yet to do that. I really appreciate you as you do that. And then most importantly, after subscribing, kindly turn on your notification bell so that whenever I post a video, you would get the video first and you'll be able to watch it and then maybe add to your knowledge. So I'll see you again in the next video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.